It's time to check your money with Mike Jennings, wealth advisor with Brackens Financial Solutions Network LLC, and the registered representative of LPL Financial, member SIPC. Good morning to you. And April is here. April showers, spring May flowers. But forget about all of that. What's the baby update?
Baby is growing like a weed. He's almost twice as big as he was when he was born. So I I don't know. Time is flying and he's getting cuter by the day, so I'm not complaining.
Looking more like mom every day is what you meant to say.
I guess that what that means.
All
Yep,
right, what
baby's
you got going this week, bro?
all right. Yep. This week, George, I want to talk about some of the recent news in the retirement space in definitely in relation to the current administration. So in the last couple days, we've seen two pretty significant things take place. Um, on one side, one opens the door to putting crypto, private equity, and other alternative investments inside of your 401k.
Ooh,
The other side quietly stripped away protection that many retirement savers didn't even know that they had, right?
wow.
Let's go into the really get into that one, right? So start with some backstory because context is everything here. So prior to the Obama and Biden era Labor Department rules, most recommendations, so advice from finance professionals, financial advisors, um, for rollover assets for 401k workplace 401k to an IRA were not considered fiduciary investment advice. And to explain for some of our listeners out there that may not be well versed in these terms, so a rollover is when you move money from one account to another. In this instance, we're talking about moving a employer-sponsored retirement plan, so a 401k, 403b, etc., into an IRA, which is typically done when you leave a job or retire. It can be a smart move for some people, often giving you more investment options and greater control over your savings. And a fiduciary is really simply someone who is legally required to act in your best interest and not their own when they give you financial advice. There's a sort of a lot that goes into it, but that's basically what that means. And that distinction matters enormously because not everyone who calls themselves a financial advisor, quote unquote, is actually held to that standard. And that's really the crux of the problem. When you leave a job and someone tells you what to do with your retirement savings, they may not be legally required to act in your best interest.
Mm,
Obama and Biden each tried to fix this when they were in the White House, and each time afterwards, the rule was challenged by financial industry groups and struck down. And we've seen that again. So most recently, the Biden administration's retirement security rule was finalized in April 2024, again targeting one-time recommendations involving retirement assets, including IRA rollovers, purchasing an annuity with your retirement assets, and investment menu designed for smaller plans. Really, what it means is that financial professionals would be held to that fiduciary standard, which is really the highest standard of care, even for a single transaction like a rollover. That rule never took effect. A federal judge in Texas formally vacated that rule just last week, I believe, and it was because it was unopposed by Trump's Department of Labor. They kind of just like said we're not gonna litigate it, which is again the same thing that happened in his first term after Obama.
mm,
So with this whole situation, there's pretty much two sides of the argument, right? So some finance professionals and insurance people, investment advisors, believe that adhering to the fiduciary standard with any transaction, even a single transaction like a rollover, is too heavy a burden.
sure.
And there are others on the opposite side that believe that these kind of professionals who do these single transactions, they typically see a pretty good commission on these transactions, and because of that, they should be held to a higher standard. Um, regardless, without a fiduciary rule or some other uniform rule covering rollovers, it's going to be difficult for investors out there, retirement savers, to know what legal standard their broker or their insurance agent or their financial advisor is held to. Each there's a thousand different ways to be a quote unquote financial professional, financial advisor, and they all operate depending on how they're licensed under different regulatory regimes, which makes it really impossible for a typical 401k participant to know what standard applies to the advice they're receiving, just face value. And this issue is sort of coming at a critical moment. So about 6 million people rolled over $700 billion into IRAs back in 2022. I think it's the latest data, which was up substantially from 478 billion just 5 years earlier. And these rollovers are happening often at retirement age when a worker may be moving their entire nest egg. So the thing that they've been building up for all these years. And that's exactly when bad advice can do the most damage. So really for our listeners out there, transparency in these moments is the greatest tool when you're working with that advisor, when you're seeking financial advice, when you're like, hey, I want to talk to somebody, I'm gonna need an advisor. Ask your advisor or your financial professional all of the questions that you need answered. A good advisor should be able to answer your questions and not have to feel the need to not disclose anything, right?
Right.
A really basic one that can quickly tell you what kind of professional you're working with. Um, do you know what that is, George? You and Vicky discussed this?
What's one basic question?
What's a question you can ask in a financial advisor to sort of get the gist of how they work and what they can do?
Hmm. What are your credentials? I guess is one of the things I would think, but no, I don't know the answer.
It's a sort of a, I'm not gonna say a cheat code, but kind of a cheat code. The basic question you can ask a financial advisor, financial professional is, how are you compensated for your
Oh,
work?
okay.
That will tell
I was
you.
in the neighborhood.
Pretty much. And that's what you said. That's another thing. You could just specifically ask them, how are you credentialed? Ask them if they are a fiduciary, right? Because even advisors like CFPs, they're not automatically considered fiduciaries when they work with you. That is defined by how exactly they are working with you. So
Mhm.
they could be a fiduciary if they're working with you in a financial planning setting, but if
Right.
they're just working with you on a transaction to either give you insurance or put a insurance brokerage account in place, they're not specifically held to a fiduciary standard. So it's all about how they're licensed, how they're credentialed, and how they are able to work with clients and how they're compensated, because that'll tell you exactly how they work with people.
Early back in the day, Vicky and I had this conversation, like way back.
So it's a good refresher, right?
Yep.
So on to the other news. Again with 401ks that really just happened this week. The Department of Labor proposed a rule that explicitly removes restrictions on alternative investments in 401k plans. And we spoke about this before when we were talking about the whole one big bill and all the changes that was going to happen with the current Trump administration. Um, and again, this is following President Trump's executive order aimed at increasing access to alternative assets. So that executive order, which was in August 2025, it directed the Labor Secretary to clarify guidance on including private market investments because the current rules doesn't necessarily disclude alternative investments, but they're seeking to make it more explicit. The type of assets being floated for 401k inclusion goes well beyond stocks and bonds, right? So these are private equity, which is investing in companies that aren't publicly traded, private
Hmm.
credit, real estate. So not like buying a house and put it in your 401k, but investing in commercial or large commercial properties or residential property funds. Obviously, crypto, which is sort of another focus point for this administration, and hedge funds, right? So those are pooled investments that are really complex and often pretty aggressive strategies to generate returns. So the proposed rule would establish a safe harbor for fiduciaries, again, people that are working with this standard of care, who follow a prudent process, covering factors like performance fees, performance and fees, liquidity valuation, benchmarking, etc. Really just giving them a more of a framework to and a basic protection in how they can do this. Experts and advisors who are discussing this are very cautious, and they caution plan participants. They're not going to just wake up one day and find, standalone crypto funds or private equity funds on the menu of their 401k, right? That's not going to be something that just happens right away. So even if this does go into effect, if it goes into effect, it could be several years before we see any real impact. So even just in that regard, fiduciaries are likely going to wait for, other people to put it into place, right? So wait for the courts to affirm that whatever rule they're putting in place, whatever protection they say they're putting in place for fiduciaries is actually going to protect them from litigation. Because again, these sort of investments, alternative investments, they're hard to sell quickly, so they're illiquid. They're hard to value. They're uneven in performance. There's no like set thing. The fee structures are huge compared to other things, right? So this is why um, index funds and target date funds that we see in plans today, they work so well because number one, they're already well diversified, and they keep the plan costs low. So, you're not adding all of these different investments into a plan that a saver can have. You're just saying, hey, here's a pool of a good mix of investments. You can just say you're going to invest in that. You're going to take some money out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, and you're going to save and you're going to invest and you're going to build your retirement fund. So it's easy, and it keeps the cost low for savers. Um, and really, when it comes to alternative investments, the average investor like simply just does not need this, right? Um, there's really no chance that most 401k investors would get access to like the best alternative managers or funds, even if they did or wanted to invest in alternative investments, right? So, you know, uh, research shows that the typical 401k investor is they really don't have any motivation, a lot of motivation to go and research all of these different investment funds. They kind of just want to put their money somewhere and kind of forget about it. So again, that's why things like target date funds work so well, right? And also an issue of people switching jobs, right? So if you start with a job that has private equity in 401k and you go to a job where the 401k doesn't have that, then how's that going to work out, right? So really, overall, what we're seeing in today's economic and legislative climate is that we we have a rule that's potentially opening 401ks to riskier, more complex investments, and at the same time, we're seeing that consumer protection rule governing advice around investments is being killed. So that's really the conversation. And that's what people out there have to consider when they pursue financial advice or take financial advice from people, right? And it sucks because people really do need good advice and
Yeah.
advice that makes sense for them specifically. Most people don't have time to read a ton of books. They're not going to read all the books I had to read to get my licenses. They're not going to read the CFP books. They're not going to do all this research just to figure out how they should be able to invest to build their retirement, right? On top of all the other responsibilities that they have. So it 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 really it should people should be in a place where they have or are able to turn to trusted advisors in their lives to advocate for them. And of course, if that's something that you need, then please call your friendly neighborhood advisor at 315-748-5540. Again, that's 315-748-5540. Or you can send me an email at michael.jennings@brackensfsn.com.
Mike Jennings is a wealth advisor with Brackens Financial Solutions Network, LLC, and a registered representative of LPL Financial, member SIPC. He is your friendly neighborhood advisor.